Hey guys, hope you're doing well. The purpose of this video is to cover a material that I find important, but information that I don't have time to cover in class. So instead I do a flipped class. And this is a nice way to also introduce you to a flipped class. Basically, a flipped class in its pure form would be if we were to do a lecture video outside of class, another reading outside of class, and then you come to class with the assumption that you're prepared to do additional work. In this situation, I'm using that term flipped class very loosely because we're not actually applying what's in this video. Instead, I'm using this video for supplementary material. All right, but I'm calling it a flipped class just because it gives me a reason to introduce the term to you. So, but what are we talking about today? So we're talking about how to write a manuscript for publication. Throughout your doctorate career, when you're working with your advisor, you're going to get very good at this, I hope. So the purpose of this video is to give you the basic foundation so that you have a general idea of the process so that when you go to your advisor and you begin working together on papers, you're not totally in the dark. All right, so our learning outcomes. So we want to describe the strategies for extracting the relevant data from research literature using a literature matrix and evidence table. And we want to incorporate writing tips into a written critique of the academic literature. And we want to understand how to write a paper. Right? That's basically what it's about. All right, so writing a scientific paper. What's the process that I go through? Now, I'm going to walk you through my process. Keep in mind that the faculty with whom you work might go through a slightly different process. So be flexible, but in general, this will give you an idea of what it's like. All right, so obviously you're going to begin with a data set, right? We're assuming that you've already collected your data and you're running your analysis. So your analyses are complete, and you're going to put those analyses into your tables or figures. Oftentimes, when I am thinking about my analysis and what I want to do, a step that I left out of this diagram is I'll start with my tables and my figures. So what is it that I think I'm going to publish, right? So what are the tables that I'm expecting to publish or the figures that I'm expecting? And then I'll go and do the analysis and then plug in the data into those tables or figures. There may be some modifications you need to do to that, but it'll give you a framework. And in fact, some faculty, including me, when you do your dissertation proposal, for the results section, will ask for that. We'll ask for blank tables that you'll later fill in once you run your analyses. Not everyone does that again, but a lot of us do. That's something that I would ask of my advisees. Okay, so you complete your analysis, you're going to fill in your tables and figures, and once you have that in place, then that gives you a good sense of, in your mind, you can start thinking, what's the story that I think I'm going to be able to tell with this data? And that helps you then select a target journal easier. At least I find it to select a target journal after I have done my analyses. So I'll select a target journal, maybe 2 or 3. I'll review the resubmission guidelines for the journal that I'm targeting. And then I make sure that I format the document that I'm going to write in accordance with the journal. Every journal may have a slightly different format for how they want you to do your tables or headers. Most journals in our field use APA, if you use AMA though, or some other format. So you want to make sure that you've got the right citation format down. That said, too, if you haven't already started using RefWorks or EndNote, I would encourage you to use one of those or some other citation manager. The school supports RefWorks, and RefWorks is free. I've been using EndNote for 10 years, but I'm actually converting over to RefWorks because it's free and it's easier to collaborate with students if I use it. So I would encourage you to do something like that. So you're going to then, the first section I write is my methods section. Why? Because it's fresh. I just did my analyses and I've got my tables here. So I write my methods section and then I write my results section after that. Once I have the methods in the results section, then I go back and I write the introduction. And I'm writing my introduction using evidence tables. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. After that, then I write the discussion, and there's some iterative process here going back and forth between the introduction and the discussion. They have to link up, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Once I have those sections drafted, then I write the abstract, and then I write the title, and then I make sure the references are formatted for the journal. I review the submission guidelines again for the journal, and then make sure that everything's formatted for the journal. At this time, I'll also often write my cover letter as well, and my title and author page, so that I've got everything I need for submission. And then I'll send it off to my co-authors for review. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do the co-author for review. One approach is to send it off to everyone and get all their feedback and incorporate it. And sometimes, if you get a lot of feedback, you may have to do a couple of rounds of that. And hopefully your co-authors are willing to do a couple of rounds. Another approach is to think about what your author order is going to be. And let's say that your second author, for example, lots of times the second author is the methodologist if you didn't run your own analyses. So then you would work, after you get a full draft, I would send it to whoever the second author is going to be, and they would do all of their comments, and I would incorporate those. Then I'll send it to the third author, incorporate their comments, and I work it down so that the people who are further down on the author list are doing less work because they're getting a cleaner manuscript. That's how I oftentimes do it. Not always, but oftentimes we'll do it. So you can use either approach. All right. So even though this is the order in which I write a manuscript, to make it easy to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the sections from top to bottom, as if you were reading it. So we'll go abstract through discussion. So the abstract. How do you write an abstract? Well, basically, most journals are going to vary anywhere from 100 to 250 words for their abstract. So this format is for the shorter side of an abstract, but if you have a little more space, you can be a little more verbose. But basically, your first sentence needs to be your topic sentence. Why is this article important? What's the public health significance? Then 2 to 3 sentences where you summarize your methods. Oftentimes, that's going to follow the format of the method section. So study design, measures, and data analysis. You might have a sentence for each one of those. We'll talk more about that in a sec. And then you have 3 to 4 sentences where you put in your key results. And the key word here is the key results, right? What is the primary results you want your audience to know if they were not to read your article? What do you want them to know if they only read your abstract? And you want to think about that, because that means you want to put in your key numbers with confidence intervals, right? So whatever your primary parameter estimates are, include those with confidence intervals so that someone, if they want to cite you, they can cite you without having to read the whole article. Because as much as we'd love to think everyone's going to read our articles, oftentimes it's just the abstracts, right? So let's just recognize that and help out the reader. Then you have 1 to 2 sentences for conclusions and implications. Keywords. Oftentimes after the abstract, you'll put your keywords in, right? So what I try to do with my keywords is I try to select keywords that are going to have a high hit rate in PubMed and that are not in my title. Why articles that are not in my title? Well, because it's already going to get hit in the database search engine if it's in my title. So I want to add other words that are not there, just to maximize the chances that my article will appear when someone does a search in their database. Keep in mind that some journals only allow approved keywords, and that's going to vary by journal. So oftentimes you can find that out by going to the Manuscript Central, is what a lot of the journals use, and you'll see a list of the keywords in Manuscript Central when you go to submit. Or if you're lucky, sometimes the journals will say, here are the keywords in the instructions for authors. Not often, but sometimes you'll see that. So when I'm trying to find the articles in PubMed to get the highest hit rate, I just go into PubMed. I open up in the library, go to PubMed, and I'll just type in a keyword, and I'll see how many hits come up. If I only get a few hits for that keyword that I'm thinking of, then I select a different one. The introduction. All right, so the introduction, the first paragraph mirrors the first sentence of your abstract, and that is, why is this topic important? What's the public health significance? And then paragraphs 2 through whatever are going to summarize what the literature says about your topic and what gaps in the literature exist. And oftentimes I'll frame that specifically around the variables that I'm going to analyze. So I might begin talking about my outcome variable, and then my primary explanatory variable, and then any other covariate. I'll sort of organize my introduction sort of following the way I'm going to be talking about my variables. That oftentimes will help the reader. The final paragraph then is the purpose of the manuscript or the study, right? And so literally I'll often begin that paragraph with, thus the purpose of this study is to blah, fill it in, all right? What's really important when you do a lit review is that you do not summarize each of the primary studies individually. If you do that, and you get a reviewer like me, you will find us banging our head against the wall. That's the worst thing that you can do. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is Smith in 2008 found this. Collins in 2009 found this. Collins' finding is similar to what Herkimer found. Herkimer found this, etc., etc. Versus, right? Our understanding of the literature about the topic is this: cite Smith, Collins, and Herkimer. So that you summarize what's the main finding, and you say the applications are this. It's a more interesting way to write, and it's easier for the reader because it helps them figure out what is it that you have learned from the literature that's appropriate for your study that they need to know. So how do you do that, right? Because that's a skill, and it's not an easy skill. Well, you use something called an evidence table. And this is what an evidence table looks like. So an evidence table in its classic form has the name of the authors, the purpose of the paper, the design and measures, the key findings, and any notes. And here's what's really important. Every paragraph that you expect to have in your introduction becomes a sentence across the top. So just merge that first line, put in your sentence. That's essentially your topic sentence for each paragraph. So if you've kind of outlined your introduction, you take that outline, you stick it in Excel, and the first topic sentence, you just fill it in, leave a few spaces below it, and then below in each of those spaces, you fill in the relevant articles that answer that topic sentence question. So you're forming the topic sentence as a question that you answer below. Obviously, when you write the introduction, you don't write it as a question. You would write it as a statement. So for example, here, the question would be, what is the proportion of breast cancer survivors who adhere to hormone therapy? Right? And then the statement might be, the proportion of breast cancers who adhere to hormone therapy ranges from X to X. And then you would go into more detail in the rest of the paragraph. All right, so this is another example of an evidence table. I'm going to pull in a template that I have uploaded to the class module for your assistants to help you out. So in this table, I'm going to shrink this down where it's easier for you to see it. There we go. And I'm going to pull it down just a touch more for you. All right, here we go. So the first one is the evidence table. Now I arrange mine slightly different, but it's basically the same. I number my references. I put the reference citation here. I say whether it's a journal, article, a book, a report, a dissertation, or other. Is it something else? Then I list the purpose of the study here, the design and measures there. And the design and measures, make sure you provide yourself enough detail so that you don't have to go back to the article. So make sure you talk about the sample size, the analyses used, etc. In your findings, make sure you include your parameter estimates and your confidence intervals. And then any kind of comments that you want to make. So what's an example of a comment? A comment might be, oh, this links back to the article with Collins in citation number 4. These might go together. Or actually, this reminds me of this and this and this, and I want to make sure I pull it up. They're just notes to yourself to help you think about how you're going to link these articles together. So use that for however you want. Or, it seems like a limitation of this article is this, da-da-da-da-da, right? However you want to do it. That's just your space. All right, so that's how I would use that. And what I would do is, again, I would merge the first line here of each one to write my topic sentences as questions and then answer it below. All right, this is another format I like to use that I want to show you. I often call this a lit matrices. Right here it's labeled precede, proceed. But this is something that will be really handy for you guys as you think about the topic for your dissertation. It's never too early to think about your dissertation topic. You may not know what it is now, but you have your area of interest. And what I would strongly encourage you guys to do is every single project that you have in your dissertation or in your doctorate program, link it back to your topic of interest. So for example, if your area of interest is Latino health disparities, and perhaps even more specifically, disparities experienced by Latinos diagnosed with cancer, right? Something like that, whatever. Then my class, for example, when you are doing your theory matrices that you have to do every 2 weeks, guess what they should be about? They should be about Latino health disparities in cancer, right? If that's your area of interest. So the other thing that you should be doing is anytime you have to go into the literature, use this table, all right, when it's not specific to a paper. This becomes a master lit table for you of the area. It's organized by pre-seed, proceed. So I have phase 1, the quality of life. I have an EPI assessment, a behavioral environmental assessment, educational and organizational assessment, administrative and policy assessment, and then any comments. So there's a lot here, right? But why do I do this? And why do I encourage you to do this? Because what will end up happening over time is you're going to find all the articles in your area of interest about quality of life. You're going to get all the prevalence and incidence of your topic area. You can see here, obviously, I do sex and substance use. You would modify these to your area of interest. So, but you'll get a sense of what I mean by what I do, right? So fill it in for you. All right, so those there, it's on the modules. I would encourage you to use it. If you have questions about it, give me a holler. Back to the class. All right, so what are some resources for finding articles? Well, let's look. Obviously, we have the school library, and I am going to actually go on the school library website here. Maybe. Let me pull it up for us. All right, I'm in the school library, so webpage. So a couple of things to look at. First is Find It Fast. I don't use this that much, but a lot of folks really like Find It Fast. So let's say that I wanted something on HIV and young men who have sex with men, right? That's an area that I do research. So I can do Find It Fast. And it pulls up some recent articles or books that I might want to look at in my topic area. All right, so it's a nice, crude search. If you're not quite sure what all you're looking for, you can start with Find It Fast, and it might give you kind of an idea of the field that you can then go in more depth with later. All right, so that's Find It Fast. Let's go look at some databases that I like to use. All right, so how do you find databases here at the school? So you go to the database, A to Z index. By the way, I'll point out here, if you know the exact name of your journal, you just go to search eJournals to find it. All right, so database, A to Z subjects. So behavioral sciences, if you click on behavioral sciences, you're going to get a lot of really great databases. Academic Search Complete, I love Academic Search Complete. They tend to have a lot of full text articles in there, which makes it pretty useful. I love EBSCO. So if we go down to, let's go back this way. Boom. So behavioral sciences, they've pulled a set that you can find that you might like. Let's go to all databases A to Z though. Click on E, and we're going to go down to EBSCO. EBSCO hosts WebLink. It links to all of the EBSCO databases. And so if you look here, you get Academic Search Complete, Medline, Psych articles, Psych books. You get nursing, ERIC. ERIC is really great in education. We use that a lot when I was doing my doctorate in ed. You get all kinds of articles here, right? All the way down to just all kinds of stuff. So you can click on the ones that you want, or you could say select all. It's up to you. And then you go through. Obviously, whenever you use these kind of databases, make sure that you are doing a select for only peer-reviewed articles, because they don't always just have that. There's one database I do want to take a moment to show you. This will be a lifesaver for you. I call it the HAPPY because it makes me happy, and the abbreviation is HAPI. It's Health and Psychosocial Instruments. Check this out, you guys. Let's say that you are trying to find a scale and you're not sure if a scale has been developed. This is a great place to begin your search. So let's say that I want to look at self-efficacy. So I put in self-efficacy. 1,001 things are going to pop up probably. Let's look for self-efficacy. Yeah, a lot of stuff popped up, right? It's a lot of things. So, but you get the idea of the article here because you've got the arthritis self-efficacy, the self-efficacy scale, the generalized perceived self-efficacy scale. So let's combine that with condom use. All right, so you can see 2,563 self-efficacy citations. But now I'm going to combine that with condom use. And I got an error. Why did I get an error? Oh, it might use. We'll just say condoms. All right, so I got 318 citations for condoms. And then what I'm going to do is come down here and combine the two. And now I've got 49 scales for condom use self-efficacy. All right. So let's pull down and we can look at those condom use self-efficacy scales. Okay, so some may not be exactly what we want, right? We've got the spiritual well-being scale, but it was predictors of self-efficacy use condoms among seropositive middle-aged African American women. They probably used that measure as part of this larger scale. So I'm not sure what that's about, but you can go in and check it out, right? But you get the age risk behavior knowledge scale, self-efficacy to engage in AIDS prevention behaviors questionnaire, etc., right? And so then you can go and you can click on these and look at specific measures. If you have an article that you want that you cannot find, you can go to TextShare within the library. TextShare allows us to share and get resources from other libraries in the UT system. So, for example, if I want books from UT Austin and I'm here in Houston, I can go into TextShare and request it and get it to me. All right. Iliad is interlibrary loan, so that's really great for journal articles for Iliad. So that's just a quick overview of our library in case you didn't know it. Now you've got a few resources and a few of my favorite ones. All right, let's talk about method section. The method section is incredibly formulaic, you guys. It's probably the easiest section to write. It's in 3 sections, and there's pretty always the same 3 sections. You have study design, measures, and data analysis. The study design is essentially 5 or 6 sentences. The first sentence is the purpose of the study. The second one is your recruitment strategy, followed by your completion time, whether you had compensation, and whether you had IRB approval. Your measure section is next. You're going to describe your outcome and explanatory variables, include citations if you're using a scale, as well as the Cronbach alpha for that scale. And then you're going to describe your covariates, usually in a line item called other measures. So some people will write their measure section as one continuous text. I prefer to use subheaders. So I'll have, for example, let's say that my outcome is condom use. And my primary explanatory variable is self-efficacy. Then under measures, I would have a subheader that says condom use, and then I would talk about my measure of condom use. And then I might have my next measure, my exploratory of self-efficacy, and I would talk about my measure of self-efficacy, etc. The third section is data analysis, where you're going to describe your analytic plan, include any citations for less common techniques, as well as citations for the software that you're using. Next comes your results section. This is also incredibly formulaic. Table 1 of your results section is always your participant characteristics. So guess what your first paragraph is? Participant characteristics. After that, each paragraph is essentially describing any other subsequent tables. All right? So paragraph 2 aligns with table 2, paragraph 3 with table 3, etc. Make sure that you are consistent with your use of decimal places, both in your table and in your manuscript. Typically, if you have a small sample, then you're going to only want to go out to at most 1 decimal place. In larger samples, I would still limit it to 2 decimal places. In the text, only include the key numbers with confidence intervals. Don't feel like you have to regurgitate every single number in the table. Otherwise, why have the table, right? So just put the key things in there. After that comes your discussion. And your discussion is also fairly formulaic, but you get a little more flexibility here. In the discussion, your first paragraph is your primary finding and how it relates back to the literature that you discussed in the introduction. All right, so it's what you want the reader to really remember. It's basically the same findings that you're going to put up in your abstract because they're that important. All right. After that, paragraphs 2 through whatever talk about any other secondary findings that you want to discuss and linking it back to the literature. Then once you get through with that, your third to last paragraph is your limitations. This is not a timed, a reviewer is not a priest, so don't feel like you have to get every single limitation in the world. Just pick out the 3 to 4 major limitations at most, put those in there, and leave it at that, all right? If a reviewer comes back and they said, hey, you didn't mention this limitation, fine, you add it in. But you don't want to list every limitation possible because at some point the reviewer might start thinking, well, why is this paper even publishable? So there's an art to that, and your mentor will help you figure out that balance. The second to last paragraph is your implications for research, practice, and policy, and then your last paragraph is sort of your take-home message. All right, other things that you need to know about. The author's notes, that's optional, so an author note might be J. Michael Wilkerson is an assistant professor at the University of Texas School of Public Health and Division of Health Promotion and Behavioral Sciences. His research interests include LGBT health disparities, HIV, STD prevention, and sex education, something like that, right? Journals will tell you if they want it, and they'll tell you the format. Acknowledgements are also optional. That is something that you can include if there's someone you need to thank. So, for example, a project coordinator or someone who was particularly helpful with the project who's not listed as an author because maybe they didn't warrant authorship, but they were critical to the study happening. It's also a nice place to thank your participants if you'd like. Conflict of interest, the journal will usually tell you exactly how to do that. You always want to list your funding source, your references, according to the journal, and then author bios, kind of like the author's note. The article will tell you how to do that, the journal rather. All right, let's wrap this up. Some suggestions for editing. Write from an outline. It sounds obvious, but when we do a lot of writing, sometimes we forget our own advice, right? So go back, write from an outline. It's going to help you out. Use spelling and grammar check. Use the readability statistics in Word. I like to always look at the proportion of passive sentences, and I've got too many. If my passive sentences are too high, kind of around 15% is my general rule. Then I'll try to go in and reduce that a little bit. It's kind of hard. You're going to have some proportion of passive sentences in academic writing, but I try not to use too many. Compare your manuscript to the QHR guidelines. I posted these for you. Because these are the most uptight guidelines I've ever seen for a journal. And if you pass muster with these, then I think you're going to have a pretty clean manuscript. Let me specifically show you some examples that I like about these guidelines. So check this out. If you go to page 9, they have word choices, right? So don't use as when you mean because. Don't use amongst when you mean among. Don't use as regards when you mean regard to or regarding. Don't use Caucasian, use like. Don't use due to, use because. Don't use etc., use so forth. You get the idea here. They give you suggestions of wordings. They also talk about common problems that happen in your writing. So an anthropomorphism happens quite a bit in academic writing. This study found. How many times have I read this study found? How many times have I probably written this study found? The reality is the study didn't find a darn thing. You, the author, and the research team found it. So while conducting the study, we found, would be the right way to say that, to avoid anthropomorphisms. So use these as a guide in editing your work. Double check your endnote and rep works. Don't assume that it's always going to be correct. Check the submission guidelines for the journal. Make sure that you've got everything as the journal wants. And then I already told you that I like to have co-authors review sequentially. That is your choice, but that's what I prefer. And then make sure that your co-authors sign off before submitting if you've made major changes. All right, that's what I got. I hope this video was helpful. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you in class.